All right, so now we've talked a little bit about jest and unit testing. Now we're actually going to start to run some tests against our grading helpers module here. So make sure you're familiar with how these work before you get started. Hopefully you remember, but we'll just go through this real quick here. Basically, we've got two functions inside of this module. One's called calculate letter grade. And what you do is you pass in a score like 90 or 85 or whatever, and it should return an A or a B or a C or a D or an F. And so that's that function. And then the other function is called calculate average score. And you pass in an array of numbers, and it basically calculates the average for you. Okay, let's see. We can get started here now. If your code looks a little bit different than mine, that's because I made some changes because I did the assignment that I'm going to give to you. But anyways, so you have the starter code for this because it's in the node sample project. Let's go back over to our sample test file here, and we'll add some more tests. So we want to group our tests. We can so what we can do is we can call describe right inside of here. So I'm calling describe, that's wrapping all of our tests, but you can nest these describe calls if you want to organize your tests in a sort of hierarchical fashion. But anyways, here's the describe function that encompasses all of the tests, and I can create a group here just for our grading helpers. So I'm going to put it right there underneath the last test that we ran here. And I'm just going to call the describe method like that. And then the first parameter that we pass in is some sort of message that describes the tests that are inside of it. So let's call this, let's start by testing the calculate average score. So what I'll do is I'll call that calculate average score. That's the test. That's the function that we're testing. The second parameter that we pass in is a callback function. So I'll go ahead and put an arrow function in there, and then I can put my tests inside the callback function. All right, so let's say if we pass in three numbers that result in an average of 80, that's what we expect it to return. Okay, so here inside of our describe, I'm going to call the it function. I could use test or it's the same thing. They're the same function. And so I'm going to describe this test as it should return 80. Okay, and then the next parameter is our callback function, and that's going to have the actual test code inside of it. Okay, and then here I'm just going to set up my tests. I'm going to create an array of scores. That's what we're going to pass into our calculate average score function. So I'm going to pass in scores that looks like that. It's going to be an array with an 80 in it, a 90, and a 70. Okay, now that should result in an average of 80, if I'm not mistaken, right? So there's what we're going to pass in as the parameter. So let's go ahead and pass that parameter in and get the result. So we can go const result equals, and then calculate average score. Okay, now interesting. Look what happened there. It did the import statement for me. So look at that. I didn't have to type that. I wish React projects would do that all the time, but there, as soon as it detected that I was calling that function, it imported it for me. So if that didn't happen automatically for you, then you're going to have to manually type this in. But we need to import the functions from our module before we can use them. Okay, so here I'm going to go back down to where we're calling the function or the unit that we're testing, and I'm going to pass in scores like that. Okay, and now I can do my figure out what I expect and see what it really is here. To do that, I call the expect function from jest, and I'm going to expect the result. So I'll pass in the result like that. And then I can do method chaining here, and I'll call the to-be function like that, or method I should say. And then we expect the result to be 80, right? Okay, let's go ahead and save that, and let's just run the test and see if it passes here. So to run the test, I'll open up the terminal here. And does it still remember it? Okay, there we go, npx-jest, and we're still working in our sample test file. So I'll go ahead, hit enter, and see if it passes here. Okay, it looks like it passed. So 3 of our tests passed. All right, so that's cool. Now, just to show you, there's different ways you could write your code. If I wanted to, I don't need this result variable, and I don't even need the scores variable if I want, but if I could go ahead and rewrite this code like this. I'm just going to take the function call that we're testing here, and I'm going to cut it, and I could paste it right in there. And then I would no longer need that variable anymore because I'm actually calling the function right here and passing in whatever it returns to the expect method. There's a lot of different ways you could write your code. Let me just run that and make sure I don't have any errors in that. So I'll run the test again here. See what we get. Should be the same results as before. I just reorganized the code. There we go. Everything passed. Now, normally you could write a whole bunch of tests just for one single function. All we did is we basically just ran one test for the calculate average score. Normally, I mean, I remember working on projects where we had to write hundreds of tests just for one function. We're going to kind of skip that right now, but I do want to go down and start testing the other function in the module. So what I'll do here is now we're kind of organizing our tests with this describe function call. So all of the tests for the calculate average score would go inside of that describe, and then we could group all the tests for the other function in another describe. That's what we're going to do here. So that's how you can kind of organize your tests, by using that describe function. So here I'm going to call describe, and then I'm going to pass in a string, and I'll just say that this one we're testing calculate letter grade. This is the more interesting one for us. Okay, so that's the first parameter, the function that we're testing. And then the second parameter is an arrow function or a callback function, whichever you choose to say. They're both correct. And I'll split those curly braces apart like that. And now let's just set up a few tests right here. Now I could use the it function or the test function. It really doesn't matter. It's your preference. So I'll go ahead and just use it here. Okay. Now here's what I want to test for. 90 should return an A, right? So if I pass in 90, it should return an A, okay? All right, so there's my message for my test. And then the second parameter is going to be a callback function. So I'll go ahead and put that in there right there like that. And I can go ahead and do this. Expect, I'm going to call my function that I'm testing, calculate letter grade, it should be. Okay, now did it import it? I wonder if it imported. Let me go check here. Let me just finish this line off first here. So if we pass in 90, okay, then I have to go all the way to the end of that line to do my matcher. In this case, you can use 2B, but there's a bunch of different matchers. And we'll talk more about those later. So we expect that to be the string, a capital letter A, just like that. So that should do it for that test. And now I just want to make sure that this function got imported. So I'm going to scroll up to the top, and it did. Okay, so that's nice. It's importing it for me. So I think I'm all ready to run it here. Anyways, if it didn't import, there's how you can import it. Just add it right there inside the curly braces after a comma. All right, let's see if this passes here. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. And then I'm going to go down to the terminal and run the tests again with npx-jest like that. See what we get for the results here. Okay, everything passed. Now look at these. So the reason why we pass these parameters in, these strings that describe the tests, is they show up here. Now, these first few messages didn't make much sense because we were just testing expressions. So we had should be false and should be false. But here you can see there's our describe. We're describing that the next few tests are for testing the calculate average score function. and we said it should return 80. I guess that's not super useful, but the next one is 90 should return an A. That's easy to read. So you kind of want to set up your test so that you can look at the results and that you can read them and that they make sense. Okay, let's keep going here. I'm going to go ahead and, whoops, make that a little smaller. I'm going to actually copy the last thing that we did right here. I'm going to copy that whole the call to the it function there, and I'm going to paste it right below itself. And then let's tweak this. Okay, so 80 should return a B, right? So 80 should return B. And then that means that we need to change this value to 80, and we expect that to be a B. Okay, save that, and let's run the tests again. So I go back down to the terminal and run that command right there, and let's see what we get. Okay, it passed, so everything's passing so far. Okay, so now we're basically testing for all the different things that can get returned. If it can return an A, we need to test it and give it something that we expect it to return an A. If it can return a B, we need to test that and make sure that it actually does return a B. So as you can guess, what we might want to do next is test for a C. We'll see what happens here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this code and then tweak it. So I'm going to copy that last call to the it function. I'm going to paste it right underneath itself. Okay, and then it should say 70 should return a C. Okay, and now make sure you don't mess up the tests, because you can get into real problems if you don't know if your test code is wrong or the code that you're testing is wrong. That can make things really confusing. So I want to be careful to set up my test properly. Okay, 70 should return a C. Okay, let's save that and run the tests. See what happens here. Oh, look at one failed. You know what? We have a bug. So I planted that bug a long time ago, and our test failed. Okay, so we expected a C, but we got a D. So you are going to have to fix this, and I think you're going to find another one that fails too. So here, let's just finish this off here. I'm going to have to, so we found a bug because our code is not working the way we expect it to. There's another one that you're going to have to fix too. It's not working properly to return a D, but you guys are going to have to figure that out. So I'll leave you in the code there. So you are going to have an assignment where you have to fix these bugs with the grading helper functions. But I just want to show you a few more things about Jest first. Let's create another little group of tests inside of this file here. So here are how do we have this set up here? So there's a describe for the average score, calculating the average score, and there's another describe here for calculating the letter grade. And then here's our final describe that encloses everything. So I'm actually going to put one more right here, another describe right there. And my code is not is my code indented right? Yeah, okay, it's hard to read the way VS Code is showing the code here. Okay, there we go. I'm going to add one more describe here. And I want to show you a few things about Jest here. Okay, let's talk about, sometimes you expect functions to throw an error. So I want to show you how that works. So here, I'm just going to put this message in here, throwing error. Okay, and so that's going to describe the test that we're running here. Then I add my callback function. That's the second param that you pass into describe, and I'm going to split those curly braces apart like that. Now I need a sample function to test here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a function right here that we can test. Normally these functions are in their own modules. I need a function just to test, for example, so I'm going to put it right here. I'll declare a function and I'll just call it sample function like that. And then it's going to take a parameter that we expect to be a number. Okay. All right. And then here inside the body of this function, I'm going to say if is NaN, and I'm going to pass in the parameter, some number. So if it's not a number, then we want to throw an error. A lot of times you want to design your functions to throw errors if they don't get the proper parameters, okay? So here, hopefully you've seen this is NaN function before, but you can use it just to test a value to see if it's a number or not. In this case, if it's not a number, then we want to throw an error. So what I'll do here inside the if statement is just simply throw an error like this. And I'll make it say like invalid param. All right. Now I can go ahead and test this. So here, right underneath the function, I'll go ahead and I can use either it or test. It doesn't matter because it's the same function. I'll just use test this time for the heck of it. So I'll go test, and then we need to describe the test, and I'll just say should throw error if param is not a number. That's a good description. It should throw an error if the param is not a number. And then I'll put a comma there and pass in the second parameter, which is the callback function. There we go. There's my arrow function. I'll split those curly braces apart. And now here's how we can test something that we expect to throw an error. Here I'll go call expect like that. And then I need to put my code in here that I'm testing. So now the way this works here, how do I want to do this here? If we expect it to throw an error, let me kind of do this. I'm going to move ahead here. We'll fill in those parentheses in just a second here, but I can use this toThrowMatcher function here. So I'll go dot toThrow like that, and that just means we expect it to throw an error. Okay. Now I could, if I expected a certain type of error, I could add some parameters right there, but I won't worry about it right now. Okay. Now, in order to test a function for when we expect it to throw an error, what we have to pass in is a function there. So this is kind of weird, but I'm going to go ahead and put in an arrow function there. And then that arrow function can go ahead and call the function that we want to test. In this case, it's sample function. Okay, now that should do it. I think that's all I need here. Now I'm wondering, in my notes, I don't have the curly braces. Oh, and I'm actually not even calling sample function because I forgot the parentheses there. So that was a beginner mistake I almost made right there. Now, in my notes, I actually don't have these curly braces. You guys know that you can abbreviate arrow functions. I don't know if that matters or not, but I'm just going to make it look like my notes here. And I am also not passing in a parameter. Okay, so we expect it to throw an error if something is not a number. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass in a string. That's not a number, so I expect it to throw an error. Okay, so they designed the Jest package to kind of make it so that you can kind of read the test code. So anyways, we expect this to throw an error. Let me save that and then run the code and see what happens here. Run the tests, I should say. Okay, I got one that failed, and I think that's the one that you guys have to fix. But yep, that's the one that you guys have to fix, but everything else passed. So anyways, I just wanted to show you that a lot of times when you design your functions, you design them to throw errors if something's not correct. So here's how you can test a function when you expect it to throw an error.